Hey, shout out, folks, and happy belated New Year. It's Bob the Old Rucker with Shout Out from the Pit. Hey, just a reminder, I'm the mouth, and Redbeard is the producer and behind-the-scenes brains. He's the guy that gets us posted and, Spotify and Apple or whatever all those venues are. I don't even understand them all. And he's also the guy that produces the show. So big shout out to my brother Redbeard. Our relationship extends, over a decade. And, through those years, our friendship grew as we discovered common ground. Besides the love of our families and country, Redbeard and I have overcome some pretty hairy garbage in our lives. And we've become somewhat productive, contributing citizens in our community while managing to just be ordinary, average guys with ordinary interests like rucking, hanging with the families, and experiencing new adventures. If we hadn't overcome those hairy monsters, we wouldn't have the awesome lives we have today. Yet, we both realized something was missing. And over coffee one day, I think we discovered what it was. Everyone has a challenge in their lives. And as my wife says, everyone is jonesing for something. Redbeard and I are two lucky dudes that got a handle on ours and maintenance programs that keep us moving forward. We discovered that by combining our energies, we could be a source of hope for folks. And as our resource page grows, we'll include other podcast links to those books and resources that we and you, find useful. One of our many desires, is that our community is happier. And the happier our community is, well, the happier we are. Like the old saying, why can't we just all get along? So that's what's in it for us. There's always room for another church, temple, mosque, synagogue, and a fledgling podcast like shoutoutfromthepit.com. We maintain a sense of anonymity because what we do really isn't about us. It's the message our guests share with you. In our brief existence, we've interviewed folks in law enforcement, clergy, even the judicial system, educators, veterans, musicians, white and blue-collar heroes who've overcome serious challenges and are willing to share their experience, strength, and hope with you. The folks we've interviewed, whether they're overcoming addictions or disabilities, they've got several things in common. And overcoming the challenge is the first part of the battle. Staying the course is the next battle. First Lady Nancy Reagan launched the Just Say No campaign. It was over 40 years ago. And I remember I was a young man at the time, and it, was pretty much as popular as, Nike's Just Do It, McDonald's I'm Loving It, and the Army's Be All That You Can Be. That slogan gained traction and became the center of comedy, memes, and interestingly brought attention to the rampant drug problems of that era. So folks say no to the hairy monsters in their lives, and now what? I mentioned what the folks we've interviewed have in common. It's a plan. And you've heard the old cliche, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Cliches are dumb. Slogans and cliches are dumb. But yet, I use them all the time. And if you have a plan, share it with us. And I'll talk more about that later. If you haven't a plan, okay, so let me run this one by you, so hang on a few minutes. Remember, Redbeard and I don't claim to be unique. As veterans, we've learned to acquire from others. So this simple plan we've acquired might be a good start for you. Now, being veterans, we're used to acrostics, acronyms, mnemonics, or, whatever you want to call them. So I start with this. What do you think about resolutions? Those that usually are made for the new year? And here's the basic definition of a resolution. A firm decision to do or not to do something. So now I ask you, why do we get so frustrated when a resolution fails? It's almost like asking, why does Johnny beat his head against the wall? Because it feels better when he stops. Yeah, I'm one of those guys who makes resolutions every year. In fact, I had 4 resolutions for New Year 2025. And you can't make this up. I broke all 4 resolutions on the very first day. And I was the most physically sick I've been in years, and I had no control over breaking those resolutions. And I didn't lose any sleep over it. Sometimes we have to AIO, adjust, improvise, and overcome. Once I was back on my feet and I got back to my program. In fact, this very show was supposed to go live in the beginning of January. Oh, well, as Forrest Gump says, stuff happens. I don't make a resolution without including some grace. If I decide to do something or not do something and I blow it, I shake it off and drive on, determined to do better next time. Doing better next time may mean taking a look at my 3 Ps. Hang on, here comes some acronyms, so don't fret. We've included them in the show notes. So the 3 Ps: program, purpose, and passion. I'm going to break this down starting with program. And remember, I've got some acronyms. So a program is your self-care maintenance program that keeps you from not only returning to your former lifestyle or overcoming any challenges, but assists you in growing mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. The P in this plan, this program, includes 5 pillars for growth that we call REMAP, R-E-M-A-P. Reading, exercise, meditation, action and anonymous service works when and where possible, and prayer. That's REMAP. So again, REMAP: reading, exercise, meditation, action, anonymous service work when and where possible, and prayer. All right, so we're going to break REMAP down. I'm going to just try to fly through this for you because, again, it's in the show notes. Reading includes any growth literature like the Bible, self-help, how-to, meditative and mindfulness books, etc. Now, folks in addiction recoveries, they have different books. Like Alcoholics Anonymous has the big book. They have their 12 by 12. A lot of recovery organizations have their own daily reflections book, 24-hour book, day by day, etc. There's a lot of literature. And I'm going to say that even material that's just relaxing and maybe not even recovery related, but stimulates mental and spiritual growth, that's good stuff. So that's reading. And of course, you can add all day long to it. And then there's exercise. And I know there's people out there that really dig and love exercise. And to be honest with you, I'm not one of them. But any exercise is good exercise. Even if it's just walking through the house, down the street, or like using rubber bands for the muscles. Now, I have a variety of exercises that I do. But that's what I've developed over the years. But exercise, or this category exercise, it also includes eating better. So like slow down with the junk food. I think you guys already know from previous episodes that I'm a Dr. Pepper and ice cream junkie, and I'm really working on it, okay? So progress, not perfection. So the body needs nutrition, and, I've got a nutrition program as well. Kind of makes me feel good about my junk food. And, I exercise, and both of these items or these areas, they help the brain to work. And we're going to do shows on this in the future, but for right now, we're just kind of explaining the plan. So this subject, it's a science all of its own, and it depends on how willing you are to incorporate it in your plan. All right, so let's move on to meditation. This is a subject that I've been working on for years, and in no way am I a master. I'm as far from being a guru as you can get, but I do get the gist of it. And that's to listen quietly and focus on whatever or whomever you call your higher power. Now, maybe a thought comes to mind. Meditate on that thought, or focus on a word or a phrase from a prayer or a reading and see what happens. A lot of people, the serenity prayer is their go-to. Just search serenity prayer online and it'll pop right up. And just like exercise and diet, meditation is a personal thing that you need to discover, what works for you. So, maybe just start by staring quietly out at some trees or a fish tank, or sit in your easy chair with your eyes closed for a few minutes, and just sit and try to empty your brain. And we've talked about this on previous shows as well. There are websites and apps and stuff for meditation, but it's part of one of the pillars for growth that we recommend. But it's another one of those things that you got to find a way to get your Zen on, right on. Okay, the next pillar for growth in REMAP is the action anonymous service work. And I talked about this in episode 13, but the gist is, if you want to feel good about yourself, do something for someone else. Again, episode 13 talks about it, but I can't begin to tell you the spiritual magic that's behind that. It's amazing. Now, this is coming from a very formerly and somewhat still selfish guy. Hate to admit it, but there's people out there that know me that would, that would attest that, yeah, I'm accurate on that one. But in short, do something for someone, and when possible, don't tell anybody about it. This action keeps us humble and out of our heads. And God wants us to be helped, and he wants us to help others. Yeah, okay, so moving along. Finally, there's prayer. Prayer is a personal communication between you and your higher power. So speak internally or externally directly to your higher power. I've learned to free flow, is that how it's said? Free flow from the top of the dome. And I also have a list for specific things that I pray for. And I even recite a bunch of prayers I've memorized. So my recommendation, if you're new to this thing, practice a few minutes a day and see how it works for you. And I think like a bunch of us, you'll find yourself praying all day long. It becomes a thing, and it's awesome. Okay, so again, REMAP, reading, exercise, meditation, action, anonymous works when and where possible, and prayer. It's a tailored individual journey between you and God. We often wonder where to begin. REMAP, it can be the beginning, and it grows based on your journey with whatever or whomever you call your higher power. So write REMAP out and determine how each area works for you. Again, it's your journey, and this is in the show notes, so some basic stuff there for you. All right, the next acronym is FUN. Yeah, fun. And this one's about setting goals. This is the second part of your plan. So remember, we're talking about the 3 Ps, right? Plan, purpose, and passion. And in plan, you've got REMAP and you've got fun. So fun, in short, is focus, use your tools, and no plan B. We all need to make a POA, right? A plan of action. And so focus, again, just getting to the nitty gritty here, right? It's goals. Make short, mid, and long-term goals. Categorize them for different stuff like finances, exercise, weight loss, career, hobbies, vacation, retirement, whatever. Don't hold back. Everything can be a goal for you. Write it out. Nothing's impossible. Now, the letter U in fun is use your tools to help you with your goals. You can share them with family, friends, counselors, shrinks, therapists, recovery meetings, and do some research. Find people that can help you meet your goals. And the last letter in fun is N. Never quit, obviously. No plan B. The more challenging the goal, the better the reward. Be disciplined and determined. If there is a higher power, then there must be a lower power. You were made to win. Remember that. The lower power wants to destroy you. Now, whatever lower power looks like to you, whether it's your insecurities, your secret sins and shortfalls, or the devil, you can overcome these. We have 2 purposes in this life, and really only 2. Get right with our higher power and set the example for everyone else. So, of course, focus, use your tools, and never quit. They equal fun. So have fun. Have fun on your journey. Sometimes you got to surf that wave of crap and just stay on the course, even if you don't see land in sight. Believe in yourself, in God. Surround yourself with winners. Have faith. Hang on to hope. Make time for self-care. Make a buzzword list of characteristics, attitudes, and behaviors you want to see in yourself and that you want others to see in you. I mentioned discipline and determination earlier. Include these powerful words. Write them down and look at them every day. And remember, God can remove mountains, but we got to bring the shovels. And now back to the 3 Ps. So we just discussed program. Now let's briefly look at purpose and then passion. And as I just shared with you, program again includes your plan, your version of REMAP, and fun. So then there's purpose, the second P. That's your legacy. So leave your legacy on hearts, not a tombstone. Remember the movie City Slickers? Mitch asked Curly, how do I find that one thing that's basically worth living for? And Curly tells Mitch that's something he's got to find. So find your purpose and you'll find what's worth living for. Yeah, that's a tough one. For many of us, it takes years to find our purpose. So Godspeed with this one. But know this, you most definitely have a purpose. You just need to find it. And finally, the third P in the triple P is passion. Passion is the feeling, the emotion you have that drives your purpose. And if you aren't passionate about something, don't do it, unless it pays the bills. But even then, if you hate your job, use REMAP and fun to find the job that gives you passion, or service work or family or whatever it is. Do it with passion. Let's say the average age is, for illustrator purposes, 80 years old. That gives us about 29,000 days to live our lives. I humbly recommend you don't waste a day. Make it a point to be the best you that you can be and use these tools that we just discussed here today. Check out the show notes for the triple Ps and start to add to your journeyman tools to get you where you and your higher power want you to be. And let us know if this plan works for you or additional insight you think will help folks. We love feedback. And you can leave feedback at shoutoutfromthepit.com. There's a message board, an email address, and an unmonitored phone number that we check regularly. So subscribe to the show for future episodes. In the next couple of weeks, Redbeard will release a table talk episode on sex, love, pornography, and a moral compass. That'll be followed by another solo episode on being a winner. And then there's Christy's story. We named that one Screw Shame. And as always, it wouldn't be Redbeard and the Old Rucker if we didn't remind you that you are not alone. And if no one's told you that they love you today, we love you. So God bless you, and as always, have an outstanding American day. Peace out.